morning of December 4th, 2003. Jonathan Luna's body was found behind a well drilling business. I'm not going to name them because poor guys, they probably get enough phone calls about this one. But they were located on Dry Tavern Road, which is less than 1,000 feet south of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and just on the sort of eastern edge of the town of Denver, Pennsylvania. Tire tracks indicated that Luna had driven onto the property and past the building, parked behind the building for a little period of time, and then from there the car was driven further west to the end of the site and into this sort of creek/ditch at the rear of the property. And they call it a creek, but, and I guess it is. It's a very tiny little creek.
And it wasn't as if the car had driven into the ditch.
No.
It just kind of tipped over the edge and stopped.
Front tires kind of went over the edge. Yeah, the engine was still running. The car was not, wrecked or anything like that. And then Jonathan Luna's body was smeared with blood. There was blood inside the car, including some on the floor on the back seat of the car.
A fair amount from different places I've read.
Like a pool of blood back there. Yeah. And the blood in the back seat, of course, led law enforcement to wonder if perhaps Luna had been abducted, maybe forced to lay down in the back of the car for a while. Yeah, maybe not. We'll see. He was well dressed. He was dressed in a business suit, tie, black overcoat. His wallet was still in his pocket. There were $20 bills strewn about the inside of the car. So robbery did not appear to be a motive in this particular crime, but it did, frankly, look like a murder.
Yeah.
Although, oddly, when the autopsy results came back, it turned out that Jonathan Luna had died from drowning and not from being stabbed 36 times, which is kind of odd when you think about it.
But you can drown in an inch of water.
Oh, yeah,
It's possible, and this is an example of it.
Yeah, well, he would have died of his wounds probably. It was just the water got him first.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's pretty easy to drown when you've been stabbed so much that you're just dying from
losing
blood loss.
Yeah, good point, too.
You're just, you're totally passed out, you've lost so much blood, and you're just laying face down in a creek. Pretty easy way to drown.
That's a good point. Well, so how did he get to that point? Let's start at the beginning. The last night he was seen alive, the night before, December 3rd, he was at home working. He'd been prosecuting a drug trafficking case, and on the third day of the trial, he had decided to cut a plea agreement with the defendants. There were two of them in this case. He was writing up these agreements, one for each, so they could have them ready in court the next morning. He left his house around 11 p.m. and went into the office.
He didn't live very far away.
Not that far away, no. Pretty quick. I mean, actually, he was really close to a major road, freeway that dumped out right downtown near his office. And then after that, he left his office at 11:38 p.m. He left his glasses and his cell phone on his desk, which is considered odd by a lot of people.
On his desk at work?
At work, yeah. It's believed that he needed his glasses for driving, although I'm not sure how badly he needed his glasses for driving. Apparently, because he did actually some driving that night, and apparently he did just fine, so I don't think he needed them all that bad.
It might have been so my wife wears glasses, but she doesn't need them all the time.
Yeah.
But she really likes to have her glasses at night because it helps cut down the glare and makes it easier to understand road signs.
Oh, yeah.
But she can still drive.
Oh, I can drive
just
fine.
Be careful about it. It's not as if she was, it's not as if he was blind as a bat without them.
No, exactly. I mean, I don't have to wear my glasses when I drive, but especially at night, I do prefer to.
We prefer you do too.
Yeah, probably. No, it's really a pain to try to read signs after dark, without your glasses on. Well, anyway, back to enough of that. But also, the phone is considered odd by people. That's people who are posting on Reddit in the year 2017 or 2018 when people
they can't imagine being away from their phone.
This was 2003 when this happened. People weren't as married to their phones, so I don't put a lot of weight on that. Well, obviously, the police were interested in knowing where Jonathan Luna went between 11:38 p.m. when he left his office and 5:30 a.m. when his dead body is discovered.
Yeah.
So naturally, they checked, of course, bank and credit card, debit card records, and also toll road receipts, because there's a lot of toll roads on the East Coast.
Oh, yeah.
We have none out here in the West, but they're just all over the place.
We have toll bridges, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even those are few and far between.
Yeah. They kind of are, yeah.
Actually, California has tolls.
Yeah, California is chock full of tolls.
But Oregon doesn't.
That's why they have better roads than we do, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Our roads are crap.
Yeah.
But they have easy passes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people do, because otherwise, if you have to stop and actually give some change to a guy, oh my God, what a nuisance. Yeah.
Crap! I'm 50 cents short.
Yeah, which means waiting in line and stuff. So they have easy passes. You just sail through the.
It's just a little like electronic thing, and it links up to the thing, and it
wireless.
They do some places they do them by license plate anymore too.
Oh yeah, because the cameras can read them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they're reading your license plate all the time anyway.
Yeah.
So and of course thanks for mentioning that, because it turns out Jonathan Luna had one in his car.
Yeah,
he had an Easy Pass. Yeah, and so between bank records and his Easy Pass records, they were able to reconstruct his little journey. And I'm not going to give you the whole timeline, but you can find it online if you really want to see it. It's in a lot of different places. The brief version is he left Baltimore, drove northeast across Maryland to Delaware, made his way to Newark, Delaware, where he took $200 out of an ATM, and then from there it appears he continued into maybe New Jersey, then off over to Philadelphia, headed northwest to the town of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Well, nice name, by the way.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I don't know if you lived there, you call it KOP? What do you call yourself? Do you just call it King or Prussia? What do you call yourselves in King
Royalty. That's what you call yourself.
Your Highness. Yeah.
So he bought gas there?
Yeah, he thought there's a little thing right off the turnpike. There's not even a formal exit. There's just a gas station right there. Bought gas, also a snack and a soda, and paid with his his debit card. And from there he continued west on the turnpike to exit 286, which is just on sort of the eastern edge of Denver, and passed through a toll booth.
Denver, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, excuse me, Denver, Pennsylvania.
When there is a town that is the same name as a major town somewhere else, it can get confusing. So just want to make sure it's Denver, PA.
Yeah, it is Denver, PA. Yeah, it's interesting too. He also went to Newark, Delaware. I never even knew until I researched the story there was Newark, Delaware.
Yeah.
Nobody else knew either, even the people that lived there.
Yeah. At that point, he got off the exit. He had to pass through a toll booth and pay, and there he presented a paper ticket. And this is one thing that happened is he was using his Easy Pass when he started his little journey, but then he switched to cash for some reason.
I would wonder if maybe it's because his Easy Pass only has a certain range. You know, they're only good in certain. You remember? So you remember here, TriMet, the rail system. They used to have zones.
Yeah.
And you could pay for zone 1 and 2, or zone 1, 2, and 3 when you bought things.
And I wonder if that's how Easy Passes work.
Well, but I'm wondering if maybe he was in some weird government-paid program that only allowed him a certain radius. Who knows? It's probably not that important.
Or maybe he just didn't want people knowing where he went. I don't know. But
and here's the question too: is most of these things would have cameras attached to them. Is it confirmed that he is the one who went and took $200 out? That did all these little things?
Not necessarily. They obviously they checked the camera in the ATM, and I've heard two versions of. Yeah, in the ATM. The other one I heard is that it was working, and he had nobody with him, and he appeared calm and normal and uninjured. So, two versions of the same thing. So I don't know. And then the other place they were able to find footage was at that gas station that he stopped at in King of Prussia, and their camera was working, but he never appears on film. So somehow he managed to evade that camera. I don't know if intentionally, probably just accidentally. Just wasn't quite pointing in the right direction. So, they didn't really have any footage of that. There were also a couple of employees at that gas station who remembered him, or at least they said they did. And they said there was nothing odd going on with him. But anyway, as I said, he left the turnpike at exit 286. And then he circled back on the south side of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, went back eastward until he got to Dry Tavern Road. Interesting name, Dry Tavern. And then from there...
Worst kind ever.
Yeah, I know. What's the point, right? Yeah. But then he goes north and turns on to the property of the drilling place. And, we know what the rest is. He, was stabbed by somebody or something, and he died.
But the weird thing about the timeline of his night is it took him roughly 3 hours to arrive on Dry Tavern Road. Dry Tavern, right? Yeah, Dry Tavern Road.
He took a roundabout route, yeah.
Right, but if you map the route that he took, it's about an hour and a half drive when there's no traffic, so there's a lot of unaccounted time there. And I think that's one of the things that gives a lot of people pause is, what was he doing in the other hour and a half?
Well, yeah, there is a chunk of time there, which is like, a lot of that stuff, he was, we caught him here, using his Easy Pass, we saw the ATM here, so That's kind of accounted for because, I mean, it would have taken them about that long to get from A to B. But there is that one little patch where it's about an hour or so, hour and a half maybe, even though it's just totally unaccounted time.
Right.
They don't know where he was or what he was doing.
Exactly.
Which, you know, he may well just have been driving around still. Or maybe he stopped off to buy drugs, buy a gun, and who knows, see a movie? I mean, we don't know. So the local authorities, which would be the Lancaster County Coroner's Office, ruled the case a homicide based on their autopsy results. Again, there were 36 stab wounds, so that is kind of suspicious. Plus, there was that head wound, and they don't say. I mean, they haven't actually released a lot of information. The case is still open.
Yeah.
So that means a lot of this stuff is still unavailable. So when they say head wound, I don't know what that means. He was hit with a rock, a baseball bat, a crowbar.
If he fell down, yeah.
You don't know. I mean, we just don't know exactly the nature of that wound. So it sounds like it's notable. Most of the stab wounds were very shallow. In fact, you know, almost all of them, they were what they call pricks, just little teeny stabs. And so not really deep stabs at all. But 4 of them were pretty deep. Only one could really be called fatal, which was a stab in the neck that partially severed one of Jonathan Luna's carotid arteries.
Those are pretty important
They're
major thoroughfares
important
for blood.
So if Luna had not drowned, then certainly he would have bled out from this wound anyway. There's no doubt about that. And as for the 32 stab wounds that weren't deep, these could be interpreted 2 different ways. One is torture. Somebody's just stabbed him a lot, just out of sheer sadism or something. Or the other way you can interpret them is hesitation marks, which we've talked about before. Because they're those shallow wounds that suicidal people make before they finally work up the will to make that final deep cut, you know.
32 seems like a lot, though.
It's a lot. Typically, from what I've heard, there's usually no more than maybe 10 hesitation marks in a typical suicide, so 32 is a hell of a lot. So that's odd. That would argue kind of for torture, wouldn't it? You would think. And then also there was the presence of defensive wounds, or maybe not. There was a leak from a federal law enforcement agent to a reporter that his hands were all slashed up and everything. Although it turns out apparently that's not true. The medical examiner said that all the stabs were basically around his chest, shoulders, neck.
See, now you gave us that article that was Mr. Luna's Midnight Ride.
Yeah.
And the guy who wrote that wrote some other articles chasing this story and said that he actually talked to the mortician that dealt with the body. And said that the cuts on the hands were so much that they had first tried to stitch him together for the funeral, and in the end, for the viewing, they had to put his hands in gloves because they were just so sliced up they couldn't stitch it closed and hide it.
Yeah.
So that would lead one to believe that they're actually cut up more.
Yeah.
And that person also indicated that the cuts on his back, because there were cuts on his neck and his shoulders, they were more around the middle of his back, kind of near his shoulder blades, what appeared to be out of reach of what a person could normally reach. You know how you get that itch between your shoulder blades and you can't get it?
Oh, that's the only place where I get itches.
Yes, but they indicated that there were cuts back there, so that's why I question the wounds weren't as bad as they were. But
I've seen very credible sources that say that all that is hoo-ha. There's another claim that his scrotum was slashed, and I've heard, but then it seems like the best sources I've seen just say that it was 36, just around, in places that were not impossible for him to reach if he had self-inflicted the wounds.
Mortician's also the one who talked about the scrotum having several that did not appear to be anything that a man would normally do to himself.
Yeah, no, typically that's not a place we go to. So I've got to say that's kind of up in the air for me.
Okay.
It really is. I mean, obviously, if he has a stab wound between his shoulder blades where he could not possibly have reached, that sort of changes things.
It does.
It really does. But so we're just going to have to be agnostic on that particular one, I think.
Okay.
So based on our crime scene and the wounds and the evidence of his very long unexplained car ride, it looked like, at first blush, that Luna had been abducted perhaps and then murdered. But then evidence from the car and the crime scene didn't totally support that theory. Actually, not at all. There was nothing found in the car. There was a partial fingerprint that was unidentifiable and a little bit of blood that didn't belong to Jonathan Luna. Those were found in the car, but that was it. And other than that, there was no evidence that anybody other than Luna had been in the car. No DNA or hair or fingerprints or footprints or anything. And
But
so,
most of the blood wasn't also at the crime scene, right? I mean, most of the blood was in the car,
I assume there was some on the ground and
like near him. But the evidence wasn't that somebody had walked up to him there and stabbed him 36 times and he had stumbled down, right?
Oh,
At the creek bed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right.
no evidence for that. No, no evidence that somebody had been in the car with him either.
Right.
So, yeah, that would be unfortunate, to be out there cruising, to go to this total place where you'd never expect to see anybody, and there's Mr. Serial Killer waiting for you. On the other hand, there was no murder weapon there.
Yeah.
Which kind of argue for murder, because a murderer, you would expect, would take it away with him, right? And no murder weapon there.
It would also explain why most of the blood was like in the back of the car, not in the driver's seat.
That would maybe be an indicator, yeah. But let's assuming for a second that it was murder, then what would the motive be? And of course, a lot of people wondered, federal prosecutor, did it have something to do with his job? Maybe. So we'll talk a little bit here about his last case, because it's kind of relevant, I think. This is the trial for which he was writing up the plea agreements on his last evening. There were a couple of guys, Dion Smith, Walter Poindexter, on federal trial for drug possession and trafficking. And this case wasn't going as well as it could have for Luna, which is why he was cutting this plea deal. And, people have wondered, could his death have had something to do with this trial, for example, because these two defendants were drug traffickers. One of them was facing the death penalty. Yeah. People were thinking, did it have something to do with these guys? And their lawyers actually poo-pooed the idea, because they said...
Of course.
Well, naturally. But actually, they make a good argument for this, because, it said that basically these guys were on the verge of getting a really sweet plea deal that actually was very favorable to them, and so they were actually happy. So that might rule them out. I don't know. But then again, he was a prosecutor, so he put other people away, so maybe somebody else was
That's
angry.
what he did for a living.
Yeah, so maybe somebody else was angry. But, of course, all that stuff was looked into. Probably his most dangerous psychotic cases and people like that were all looked at. They found no evidence to link anybody to it. At the investigation ground on, about 6 or so weeks after the murder, a small penknife was found in the mud of the creek where his body had been found. So, hey, that's progress. And police say that they believe it was Luna's. They won't say whether that's blood or fingerprints on it. They also don't say why they've concluded it was Luna's knife. I don't know if they showed it to his wife or
if it had his initials carved in it.
That could be it
Yeah.
too. I have no idea. So again, one of these days when they close his case and we can look at these records, we might find out. But along about this time, this is along about February 2004, as the case grinds on. Of course, it attracted a lot of press attention on the East Coast.
Wait, which case? Jonathan Luna's case?
Yeah.
Okay, because you started
that's a good point. I talked about Dion and
Yeah. So clarify,
Walter.
we're still talking about
We're back
the
to
Luna
talking about the
case.
Luna case. I just wanted to talk about a little bit. And I'll talk a bit more about Smith and Poindexter in their case here in a minute. But around this time, leaks from law enforcement began to appear in the media. It turns out they had found that Luna had a profile on at least one internet dating website.
OK Cupid, probably.
Yeah, I know. Grindr, Tinder.
What
yeah.
was the one? that
Ashley
was-
Madison?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably that one.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
date.com.
So naturally, this raised the possibility that maybe he got murdered by some very sketchy woman that he met online.
Or her significant other.
Or maybe that too. That always raises that possibility. And they also found out that he had about $25,000 in debt from a couple of credit cards and a second mortgage. So, $25,000, that's not chicken feed. Although I guess for a guy making his wage, maybe it's not a life-ending deal either. I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine he was pretty well compensated in that position.
Yeah,
Probably.
but here's the thing about that is I also feel like I would like to make that assumption, but if you have that much money, you pay your debt off.
Yeah.
You usually, not always, certainly there are people who are irresponsible, but if it was well within his means to pay off that debt, it's likely he would have been making a dent in it.
If he's the kind of guy that leaves the house at 11 o'clock at night and goes to the office and then leaves the office at midnight to come back home because he had to go do more work, he may have just those kind of details just didn't matter.
Maybe.
Let it be on the minimum payment. I'll take care of it eventually until it piles up, and then he's got an OS moment,
Yeah.
and a Brandon
Suddenly
moment, and then he
realize.
takes care of it.
Well, maybe his wife usually took care of money stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. Speaking of his wife, oh, by the way, it turns out he also had at least one credit card that she didn't know about.
Yep.
Yeah, which is not a
Don't
good
we all?
sign.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm telling your wife.
Yeah.
I have bank accounts that woman doesn't know about.
Oh.
Don't tell her.
Yeah. She doesn't
We're gonna
listen,
call
she doesn't
her
listen
right
to the
now.
podcast, thank God.
Yeah, thank God. That's
Hopefully
the other
nobody-
reason I'm spilling the beans here.
Hopefully nobody that she knows listens.
And I don't have an insurance policy on her, though. No, not
You
at all.
don't?
Not
Okay,
at all. Not at all.
Gosh, yeah, I do. But anyway, what else? Oh yeah, and I don't know how hinky this is. Apparently, he'd taken a lot of unexplained trips to Philadelphia. He took 4 just in the month before he died. Nobody really knows why.